Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. No. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, oh Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. Is the mic too soft? Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya, Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Oh Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. We'll sing the Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. When we were in Govardhan Hill one year during Prabhupada's disappearance day, one of the devotees was noting that all around the world there are kunjas. Each one of our ISKCON temples has an altar, and on the altar, Radha Krishna is there, or Sri Shigornitai. But it's a kunja is like a secret place in the Vrindavan forest, and the various places of Krishna's path become manifest by the mercy of a pure devotee, because as Yudhishthir said to Uddhava, Bhavadvida Bhagavatas Tirtha Bhuta Swayamvibo Tirtha Kurvanti Tirthani Swantakstena Gadabrita, that the pure devotees Krishna within their heart, even more importantly, and so that we can note the environment that people live in actually and see what they've manifested. From the heart of those who love Krishna comes the environment of Vrindavan, and it's palpable. Not just palpable, but also practical, because one can worship Krishna anywhere in the mood of Vrindavan. And Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we should all, and if you can't be there physically, he said, within your heart and your mind, he's there. Really, the practice of Krishna consciousness, as inculcated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the ways and means to come to this of Krishna spontaneous love. And this is the pinnacle of existence for every living entity. So we can all feel that environment here. Vrindavan's manifested because of the devotees that live here and all of you who've come here in that mood. So we'll celebrate that by singing this beautiful song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who through his writings and his songs brought Vrindavan to life. And Prabhupada especially relished this song. Every time he sang it, he was in a kind of spiritual trance. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Jaya Girivardhari Gopi Jana Baba Jaya Vardhari Shudanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Nitai Gaura Haribo. Om Natimirandasya Gyanan Shalakaya Kshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vande Sri Guru Sri Padakamalam Vaishnavam Shri Sahagana Natam Jivam Itam Sadhuna Sahim Shri Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktabinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna says Janma Karma Jame Divyam Evati Tatvata. This is a very powerful statement. And that telling us that we can together and go to the spiritual realm by coming to understand his transcendental nature. And there's various aspects that he mentions of his transcendental nature. Janma is the first thing, how he takes birth in the world. It's not like an ordinary person. In the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Dev describes the plight of a soul who's captured by the illusory energy. And he says, Karmana dhaivanetrina jantur deho papate striya pravishtu udaram pumsoreta kanashraya. That the soul is a particle of consciousness. And when that conscious living being misuses independence and gets enraptured and caught in the cycle of birth and death, each time that that soul leaves the present body, there's a decision made by a higher authority about where the soul will go. Even Kunjafi, the soul taking on material bodies one after another. And there's no relief for this except for when there's divine intervention. And especially that comes from receiving information from the spiritual realm. In fact, we just read on the way home in the car last night in the 11th canto about how Krishna's describing the process of getting spiritual knowledge. And he says it burns up all of one's karma. He says the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita, Gyanagni Sarva Karmanam, that when you come to clear knowledge of who you are and what the purpose of life is, then you're reluctant to implicate yourself. Do you find that? If you have clear knowledge, then although something looks tempting, you don't do it because you realize the consequences. That's human life, meant to think about consequences. Beyond that, in the teachings that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave to Sanatana Goswami, he said, Maya Mugda Jivana Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan. It's not automatic that people come out of Maya, but he said when they get proper information, then they can be released. And that's why Srila Vyasadeva went to the trouble he went to describe Krishna's pastimes. In fact, he did it with a little extra help from his guru, because he had compiled all the itihasas, like the very who came to him feeling unfulfilled, and him talk about the personality. By doing that, that's the primeval desire of the soul is to serve and love Krishna, but we get dissuaded and distracted. So if we can hear about Krishna and understand his nature, which is that he doesn't take birth by force, but he comes of his own volition, his own sweet will, as Prabhupada says, and that his karma or his activities are also not ordinary. Ordinary activities means that I work in the world, and it's a kind of exploitation, because just to maintain the body, I have to kill other living beings just by breathing and walking around, what to speak of eating, and what to speak of cutting down all the rainforests so we can have a place to live, or whatever else it comes from that, maple syrup or something. There's no maple syrup in the room. Don't put that on your SAT. That's from our friends up north. But Krishna is not obligated, and his activities are transcendental. They're called lila. They're not ordinary. Most people, in case you haven't noticed, when they have to pain, and from that hard work, what they get is more hard work in varying degrees. Everyone's work. He's not obligated to do any work. Does that sound nice? And Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, Namam Karmani Limpan, he describes how, if you know karma chame divyam, and you understand how my activity is divyam, it's not and you're able to accommodate that. Then he says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo viti tattvata. You come to this clear understanding. Tyakva deham. When you give up the body, which is an inevitability, it can happen any minute. Punarjanma, 90. You don't have to. And in the material world, it's so powerful. Hearing about Krishna, knowing Krishna, that you don't take another birth in this material world. Know about this and his activities as transcendental. So hearing about Krishna is the panacea for all the difficulties. For at the Naimisharanya forest, the sages said, Kova Bhagavatastasya Punyashloke Karmana Shruti Kamina Shinuyad. I forget the last line, but he's asking, if you can look it up, that who is there in this age of Kali Yuga who won't listen to this? Knowing how potent the sound vibration is, who will not listen to it? Kova Bhagavatastasya Punya Shloke Karmana. That's just by hearing it, you become cured of the disease that keeps you in the material world. So who won't hear about it? And that's answered later on in the 10th canto, the beginning of the description of Krishna's pastimes. Then Shukadeva Goswami answers it. And he says, as somebody who's determined to kill himself or to kill animals, this type of mentality and this activity is prohibitive. People, they don't have the wherewithal to hear. But for those who can, this is the main process for attaining perfection in life. So, in Vrindavan, the devotees are this is noted in many places. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna himself, when he came to teach about the love that the devotees in Vrindavan have for Krishna. Specifically, this was what he wanted to teach, because many people have awe and reverence for God. They worship Narayan and Vaikuntha with awe and reverence, but they don't know very much about the spontaneous devotion of the devotees in Vrindavan. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to reveal that, and also that there's a superior process of worshiping God. This is the spontaneous path that the devotees have in Vrindavan, called Ragatmika, where they, oh my goodness. Haribo. This is a work of art. It's very beautiful. Hare Krishna. Yes, Kova Bhagavatastasya Punya Shloket Karmana Shuddhi Kamo Nashinuyad Yasha Kali Malapaham. Who is there desiring deliverance from the age of Kali Yuga, who won't hear this message? And then Nivrittatarshar Upagiyamana Bhavausharash Chatram Manobhiramat Ka Uttama Shloku Kunanavarat Puman Virajeta Vina Pashugnat. Was that on the Bhakti Vaibhava? Not yet. Okay. This is Nivrittatar share. Those who are qualified, they're finished with material topics. Pagiyamana, they just want to hear spiritual topics. And this is the kind of medicine that cures us from bhava, or the attachment to the material world and repeated birth and death. And then the question is answered. But people who are killing themselves or killing animals, because it's a gross ignorance. Killing oneself means neglecting one's spiritual practice. And killing animals means that understanding Krishna in everyone's gentler way of living in the world. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in speaking to Ramananda Roy, wanted to present to us what is the path to attain Vrindavan. How could one actually come to this position of rising above bhava, which sounds like an onerous task in and of itself, and great yogis take pains to meditate and try to detach themselves from the material world for thousands of years, and then still they're not successful. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in speaking to Ramananda Roy, wanted to establish for the general mass of people, how is it that one could actually come to the stage of perfection by loving Krishna? And he asked Ramananda Roy to expound upon this. And Ramananda Roy started for being complete. He started in a very simple way, and he talked about how one should take up the varnashrama system. And Mahaprabhu wasn't impressed. He said, this is external knowledge. And then Ramananda Roy said, then the perfection is to renounce the varnashrama. And Mahaprabhu said, no, that's still external. He said, then some work mixed with devotional service. And Mahaprabhu said no. And then Ramananda Roy offered a verse that was spoken by Lord Brahma, who was in Vrindavan at the time that he spoke it. And he gave this directive that Jnani prayasam udapasya namante eva jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya vartam stanistita shutigatam tanuvan manobir e prayaso jita jito pyasitais. And that is, don't use your intellect to try to understand God. Completely renounce the idea that you're going to control the situation and that you'll be able to understand anything by your own power. You can start there, he said. And he had firsthand experience because he had just doubted the idea of Krishna, the cowherd boy in Vrindavan, being the supreme. And then he tried to play a trick, lightheartedly, but still it kind of backfired. As you all know, Krishna was, he's the most clever. One tries to cheat Krishna, then Krishna knows how to expertly cheat the person back. And so Brahma had seen in his endeavors to steal the cowherd boys how Krishna had manifested himself as the cowherd boys and the calves. And he became convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he also was not inclined anymore to use his great intelligence, he has 4 heads, to understand. So he said, Jnani prayasam udapasya namanteva. Just give up any endeavor from your own power to understand. And then stane stita shrutigatam tanuvan manobir, tanuvan bodies and mind that comes spiritual. Described by Narada that the sound vibration of the Shadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratish Yapi Namanyananta it's not from the materials, it's a different creation. And Viplava means that by hearing this different sound vibration that comes from beyond this mundane world, that one will experience a shift in one's life. What we consider to be important, it'll be turned on its head and will be directed towards what's most important for the soul, which is loving Krishna. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted this verse, and especially the process, stane stita, shrutigatam, means that whatever situation you're in now, you can't get out of it. I mean, you can try shifting to Phoenix, Arizona, or Cleveland, Ohio, or maybe go a little north up to Toronto, across the Great Lakes. This is going to be the same. So, move to Bangalore, you go to Himalaya, you go to any planet. And Krishna discourages this in the Bhagavad Gita, this idea that maybe I'll go to the higher planetary systems or Hawaii. And Shine Punye Martya Lokam Vishante, he said it's all Martya Loka. It's all the same thing, and the frequent flyer miles you use to get there will be used up. You'll fall back down again. You'll be back in coach, and or worse. And that's the plight of the material world. But for those who just give oral reception to the sound vibration of those, and then coming into the pastimes about Krishna in Vrindavan in the 10th canto, and stanis dita shruti katam tanavan manobir, when one develops one's hearing, then one begins to worship the sound vibration and pays obeisances with one's body to the Srimad Bhagavatam, to the sound vibration that comes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, or for those who are speaking the Bhagavatam, they become revered by an advanced devotee. And one uses words to repeat the Bhagavatam in one's mind. And then Jita, Ajita becomes Jita, which means Krishna, normally one can't conquer God. But by the power of the sound vibration from the spiritual world through the Srimad Bhagavatam, then one develops a sense of love. And love is unconquerable because there's no worldly motive in it. And because when one has no motive, then we have nothing to lose. And we only contemplate service with no motivation whatsoever. And by that mood, by a loving mood of rendering service, then the person who's being served feels indebted. And that's also true with Krishna, charmingly. Although Krishna is the supreme controller, and although he's Ajita, he can't be conquered by anyone. He is conquered by those who develop this sense of love within their heart. And how's that sense of love manifested? Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karma jnanavritam anukulina krishna nushilanam bhaktir uttama. They, the devotees who start to practice devotional service, they cultivate this mood of favorable service to Krishna in every way possible. And as it develops, the devotee begins to be unmotivated in his or her practice. This is described by Kapila in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the explanation of devotional service. He talks about 4 kinds of practitioners of bhakti. One in the mode of ignorance, one in the mode of passion, one in the mode of goodness, and one who's completely transcendental. So how can devotional service be in the mode of ignorance? Prabhupada describes it that a person who's affected by the mode of ignorance can practice devotional service and this person meant towards Vaishnavas and so considers that I'm the best. My devotional service superior to everyone else's, and they're all just pretenders. And there's this sense of anger. So this is devotional service, but it's in the mode of ignorance. And then in the mode of passion, one becomes a separatist. And a separatist means that one has a separate interest from Krishna's interest. Krishna has his own interests. And besides babysitting us here in the material world as the super soul, which he does, because he loves us so much, and Kunji told me today, not directly, but she said today's theme was to talk about how Krishna is our best friend. Krishna has an agenda, and I may be performing devotion, but I'm thinking, yeah, but I want my thing. I'm not thinking I want Krishna to have his thing. I'm not thinking about serving Krishna's senses and his desire and what he wants. I'm thinking I'll do devotional service. I'll put $1 in the hundi, but I expect 10,000 back because I've heard God gives with 10 hands. This is separatist. And then in the mode of goodness, karmarpanam. It's called, I know that by serving Krishna, karmani nirdahati kintucha bhakti bhajam. I'm destroying my karma. So a person thinks this is the right thing to do, and I'll do my duty, but everything I'll offer it to Krishna. And then there'll be no reaction. But this is sattva gun. It's not shuddha sattva. So then Kapila Dev says, what is devotional service in shuddha sattva? And he says that when one hears the transcendental sound vibration of the Bhagavatam, or the holy name, or anything to do with Krishna, then immediately becomes attracted to it so much that the mind runs after the sound vibration. The example, Gunashrena Sarvamayu Guhashaya Manogatir Avchina Yata Gangam Butsa Gangam Bato Uzdao. That just like the Ganges is toward the ocean. If you watch it, it just, and in the same way, a person in Shuddha when they hear the of Krishna, the sound vibrations, and then he says there's some qualities. What's the lakshana or the quality of this devotional service? Says that it's spontaneous and it's also uninterrupted. It never stops. It's 24 hours a day. It's always flowing. So when one hears, practices hearing Krishna, then one can rise above the devotional service and the mode of ignorance, passion, goodness, and then come to this point where one's spontaneously attracted only to hearing the sound vibration of Krishna. Actually, he said in Nivrittatarsha Upagiyamanas that he indicated this quality of the person who hears Srimad Bhagavatam and is attracted to it. He began describing, took his birth, and then how he, then in Vrindavan, things, a little village, and these there are very simple. Nanda Maharaj, when Vasudev's a Kshatriya, he's a little more dating. Kshatriyas have to plan society, and he had understood the situation in Vrindavan. Was up to no good, and he wanted to kill Krishna. And he mentioned how there was going to be some trouble in Vrindavan. Meanwhile, Nanda Maharaj, Vaishya, was very simple. He went off to Vrindavan to pay some taxes, bringing milk products. You could pay in milk back then. And he was thinking about the words of Vasudeva, how there was going to be some trouble in Vrindavan. And when he was coming back, he noticed that there were these fires burning. Of course, they smelled really nice because it was the body of Putana, the first demon Krishna killed when he was a little baby, by sucking out the milk and then the poison that she had smeared on her breast. And then the coward men had cut up her enlarged body. She was a demoness, so she grew to an enormous size. And of course, whenever we distribute Krishna book, at least in the bygone ages, when we distribute to tell people on how to be more in harmony with nature, beautiful little stories. But when we read this, the coward men come and hack the body of Putin into pieces and put it in a fire, which sounds kind of ghastly until you understand the context, and that is, this was a demoness killed by Krishna. And then you hear that the fire, the smoke coming from the fire was like a guru. It smelled pleasant because Krishna had purified her body. Whomever he touches, including the people, the demons that he kills, they also get completely purified. So much so that the body of Putana smelled sweet when it was burning. And from this pastime, this initial pastime, where we find out that actually Putana received liberation from Krishna to become one of his mothers in the spiritual world. This became widely known, and it's trumpeted in the Srimad Bhagavatam, so much so that you'll find when Vidura is inquiring from Uddhava about the Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna, Uddhava wrests himself away from the spiritual world and tries to be in the present to speak. When he speaks about Vrindavan, one of the demonists that Krishna killed, and he says that Kamvadaya lum sharanam prapadye. Vrajema. That's the first line. I was saying the last line. Starting in the end. Because what he's asking, kamvadayulum sharanam. Vrajema. It's another question, just like kova bhagavatastasya. Who won't listen to this? And then he asks, kamvadaya lum sharanam vrajema. Who will take shelter of anybody else? He wants to know. Because Putana was the demoness. She tried to kill Krishna. That was her sworn intent. She signed up for it. She was an assassin. And she wanted to come and kill him. And then Krishna purified her and gave her complete liberation in the spiritual world. So then he says, does Uddhava, where else are you going to go for shelter besides Krishna? He's so kind. He's so friendly that even when he kills the demoness, Putana, just concentrate right here, over here, Kali, Kunja Kumari. It's technological. Then, why would you take? Where else will you find this great mercy from other than Krishna, especially in Vrindavan? And so Prabhupada mentions in his purport to that verse that Krishna takes the least qualification of the devotee. He accepts that, and he discounts all the other bad qualities. He just finds that one little spark of devotion. And so with Putana, he gave so much mercy that later Brahma, in his prayers that I just mentioned, that he's speaking after stealing the cows and the cowherd boys, he remarks to Krishna that you gave so much mercy to Putana. Do you have any left for the residents of Vrindavan? Because it's remarkable, actually, that he did that he benedicted Putana so much that she got liberation in the spiritual world. So it's like, didn't that finish all your mercy to extend yourself that much to this demoness? But the answer is no, because Krishna's known, Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu. He's the ocean of mercy. It's an unlimited ocean. And so when one lends one's hearing process to Vrindavan pastimes, then one one's heart starts to change, and one transfers the world. And there's so many of them, but they're all recycled. They're the same kinds of conundrums that humans always deal with in this world. In politics, there's always the ascent of some person, and then things go wrong, and then some people hate him, some people like him, and then there's always problems with political boundaries and relationships, and all these things can capture the mind and carry us away into the material world. So if one determinedly hears the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, then one will start to be the recipient of this kind of mercy that Krishna gave to Putana, and one's life can be transformed. And one of the other examples, there are many, but when the wives of the Brahmanas who were addicted to Vedic sacrifice, oftentimes people find out about various rituals, and then they think that this is the perfection of life, to perform every single ritual perfectly. And if we do this, then we're making advancement. Nothing wrong with rituals, of course. However, when it becomes the guiding force and one forgets about the spirit behind them, then one can forget Krishna even while doing the rituals. And this is what happened to the Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices. Because when Krishna and Balaram were in the forest with their friends said, how about we eat? Actually, they were thinking in service to feed Krishna, but they pled to him that we're hungry And Krishna said, well, you can go beg some food from the brahmanas nearby because they're about to perform a sacrifice. And there's food, and it's at a point in the sacrifice when they can actually distribute some of the food. So you can go ask, but don't ask in my name, Krishna said. Ask in Balaram's name, because Balaram's a Kshatriya. I'm a mere Vaishya. Maybe they'll respect that. He's framing it to show how addicted they were to the idea of varnashram and caste, and we're Brahmins, you're Kshatriyas, this one's qualified, this one's not qualified. And so the boys went there, and they asked in the name of Krishna and Balaram that they're hungry. They're in the forest nearby. And the brahmanas didn't answer them. It wasn't they said no. They just ignored them like they didn't exist. That's the worst thing that you can do to anybody. So just pretend like they're not there. You didn't even hear them. And so the boys came back disappointed to Krishna and Balaram. And Krishna said, that's the way of begging. Some people give, some people don't give. Don't worry. Now go ask the wives of the Brahmins. And when Krishna and Balaram were standing nearby, the boys went in to talk to the women who were the wives of the Brahmins who were cooking for the yajna. And just as they were explaining that Krishna and Balaram were nearby in the forest and that they were hungry, before they could finish their request, the women started for the forest with as much as they could carry to feed Krishna and Balaram. And spontaneously they went there. It was a fearful time in Vrindavan, so much so we find that later the Brahmanas, although they were transformed because of the association of their wives, who had become pure devotees, the Brahmanas then saw their rituals as being superficial. In fact, as Prabhupada translates that section of the Bhagavatam, after seeing their wives and their spontaneous love for Krishna, and remembering that they had so much been engaged in ritual sacrifices and forgot the purpose of them, which is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, their sacrifices. They said, to hell with our Vedic sacrifices. To hell with all the time, everything, the purpose. But and now knew that they're gurus and had showed them. They were afraid to go see Krishna in the forest because they thought Kamsa will notice. They had a vested interest that if we're seen going there, then we'll be on the bad list. We could be on CNN or something that someone will come on and say something about us, and we'll lose some of our prestige or position or maybe even our lives. But Krishna Bhakti is so powerful that in the wives of the Brahmins, they didn't think of any of these things. They just went directly to see Krishna and Balaram in the forest without considering the circumstances. So then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains why. And it's because they had heard about Krishna from the residents of Vrindavan. Where? At the local market. There's a place in which you go to buy nut leaves. Use those in sacrifices, like in the panigrahana. You put a little, pine leaf in the hand, and they put together. They're auspicious, and there are other things you need for ingredients that you have to go get for yajnas. What are some other things you have to get? You got to get a little wood. You got to get tulsi wood. There's lots of ingredients, and that was husbands go to the market. So while they were at the market, they just happened to be conversing with some of the Vrijabasis. And what were they? Do you suppose? Krishna. So in their conversations, the wives of the Brahmins would hear about Krishna, and that's how that spontaneous love developed. So when the opportunity came that Krishna's nearby in the forest, he wants some service from you, they jumped up. They didn't think, well, wait a minute, what time's the sacrifice? They didn't think, what'll our husbands say? They didn't think there's a dangerous situation in Vrindavan right now because Kamsa wants to kill everybody who has anything to do with Krishna. They didn't think of that. They only thought, I'm going to Krishna. And this is the mood that one develops when hearing about Krishna in Vrindavan, the mood of the devotees there. And this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, is the perfection of life, to develop this. So Srila Prabhupada then brought this same method to the whole world. When he started translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, which he mentioned on the Jaladuta was the panacea for all the problems of the world. He got to the third canto, and then he stopped and he did a summary of the 10th canto called the Krishna book, because he felt that he could leave the world at any time. He'd already had 2 heart attacks. He was not in good health. And he wanted that everyone in the world could hear about Vrindavan. Because he knew that without hearing about Vrindavan, that it wasn't possible for people to transcend the material world and attain perfection. In fact, that was the very conversation that Narada and Vyasa had, because Vyasa had already written the precursor to the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a compilation of what is sometimes called the Bhagavat Purana, and it had all the good commonsensical instructions that we see in the Bhagavatam, but it didn't have Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. And therefore, Narada told him, is it? And speak for the benefit of the world. That's what will trans, and that into trance. And then he came and gave us the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have the greatest gift in the form of the Krishna book, and 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam contains Krishna's pastimes. And not the least of which is of Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill, manifestation in the backyard here of here. Where are we? We're in San Jose? Not really San Jose? Where are we? Vrindavan. Across the river into Vrindavan. You can feel Vrindavan anywhere by hearing pastimes of him killing the demons. And one can hear these over and over and over again. And by hearing them, we start to develop a spontaneous attraction for Krishna. In Vrindavan, was Gopi available, because they were in anxiety all day long when Krishna was going to come back from the forest, from herding cows. So amongst all the beautiful gopis, he'd pick the tallest one and have her stand up high to try to look out to see when Krishna was going to come back. No, but she took the highest vantage point that she could. Each day they'd be looking, so when's Krishna coming back? That was their preoccupation. And also the acharyas talk about how Krishna and Vrindavan interacted with all living entities. So he mentions how, just as grahastas, when they hear a Sankirtan party coming, they run out and they offer obeisances. Because isn't that the most joyful sound you can hear? It's like you may be walking downtown somewhere on the rough and tumble of San Francisco or New York, and then all of a sudden you hear and at first you think, oh, that must be traffic noise, and there's no, those are kartals. And then you can run to that place and offer obeisances. So he said, in the same way, when entities in Vrindavan, Krishna's flute song, the trees and the creepers, and while Krishna is performing his pastimes, he kills Keshi, although Krishna matter of reciprocation with anybody, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mam Prapadyante. And also, he says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu nami dveshosti na priya, ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham. Everybody, except if you're engaged in worshiping me, and then you live in me, then Krishna just being equal, and I'll give you tit for tat, whatever you want, you can have it. But if somebody actually loves Krishna or tries to worship him by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, then there's an inordinate reciprocation. So in Vrindavan, we see that also in all the pastimes, even as Krishna's killing Keshi. Keshi feels Krishna's arm enter into his mouth. His arm, which is usually as tender and cool as a blue lotus. But when he punches Keshi in the mouth, because Keshi deserved it, Keshi felt Krishna's normally soft, tender, cooling arm to be as hot as thunderbolts, as lightning bolts in his mouth. And meanwhile, the residents of Vrindavan, headed by the gopis, were appreciating Krishna's charming looks, even as he was smashing the demon. So Krishna simultaneously reciprocates with every living entity in that's anywhere. And Prabhupada says that he's so friendly that he comes with us wherever we go. Even if you decide you want to try out the body of a pig, he's like, Krishna, I really want to be a pig. And you try really hard in this life to be a pig. And then material nature, karmana daivanitrena jantur deho papate. It's like the demigod's calculation is like, he wants to be a pig? That's what he wants to be a pig. So they give him a pig body. But Krishna comes with the living entity because he's so friendly. He's so friendly towards each living entity. And how many living entities are there? They're asankhya. You can't count them. They're unlimited. But he expands himself, and he has this relationship and friendship with every living being. And then living entities want all kinds of things. Pantastu koti shatavatsara sambragam yuvayoradhapi manaso munipungavanam. Sopyastya prapadatin. That's not the verse. What's the other one? It's yadbhava bhavitariyo manujastataiva samprapya rupa manima sharyana bhusha stuktaryameva nigamai patitai stivanti. All kinds of mantras because they want something. And so those who come in contact with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his pure devotees then come to this mood that I don't want anything else. Nadanam na janam na sundarim kavitam bhajagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhakti. In fact, I'm going to reform my life so that I do everything in such a way that it will be pleasing to Krishna. And meanwhile, I'm going to cultivate love for him. So Prabhupada gave us in this lifetime, follow the regulated the path set forth by the great devotees. Don't dabble in the material world and think that I'll take some liberty, because you'll get caught again and you waste time. But live a clean life and follow how the great souls have conducted themselves. Enough, clean as a bean, so that you can sit down anywhere and chant Hare Krishna and hear the Bhagavatam and be happy. And if you can do that, and Tanuvan Manobir, if you start to develop this urge that I can hear this sound vibration again and again and again, and this is where I want to be. Anywhere the sound vibration is, that's where I want to be. Anywhere the sound vibration isn't, I don't want anything to do with it, except for to inject the sound vibration into it. That's even more fun, to wreck stuff in the material world. They got a perfectly good mela going on, campers pulling in, twanging. My dog died. My pickup truck broke down. She left me. Blah, blah, blah. And then we distribute a Krishna book. Goes right in the middle of it all. That's like dropping an atomic device somewhere in the middle of all that twangy, sing-songy. I lost my hound dog. Or whatever kind of nonsense anybody sings here in this world. The birds, it's all nonsense. Sorry, guys. But they wake up and it's like, yeah, we're birds. We got this little chirpy thing going on. Everyone's got some little chirpy, twangy, little nonsense thing going on in the material world. And so Vyasadeva comes and says, here's a little relief for you, Jiva. Hear from the spiritual world. Sing the song of the spiritual world and go to the spiritual world. And Krishna says very plainly in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan Pitrun Yanti Patir Vrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Mam Yajinopi Mam. You're free to go wherever you wish. Isn't that nice? Krishna is so kind. He's in the heart. He's instruction. Here's the best thing to do. I'd rather do something else. Krishna comes to speak Bhagavad Gita, and he says, I love you. I want you to come back to the spiritual world, but you also have freedom. Whatever you choose, wherever you desire to go, whatever you want to invest your heart in, I'll facilitate it. He loves us so much. So we should love him back. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us the best way. Arajo Bhagavan Vaisesika Tad Dham Vrindavana Ramya Kachidupasana Vraja Vidu Arganava Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumartamahan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matamidam Tatradara Napara. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu held these truths to be the highest and most important. He said, Krishna and his Dham are the same. Vrindavan Dham is Krishna. If you go there and you take the dust on your head and you stay in Vrindavan for 3 days, you're in Krishna's internal energy. You're with Krishna. And you should worship the Dham and remember the Dham. Serve the Dham. Then he said, the best way conceived by any was that of worship. He said, Srimad Bhagavatam is the authority to many people. And if you do, you still have to corroborate with Srimad, many different stories through interpolation from different regions around India. But Srimad Bhagavatam is completely pristine and protected, and you'll have to go back there to say what really happened. So might as well get a PhD in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he said, Prema Pumarta Mahan, the ultimate goal of life is to develop love for Krishna. So get that tattooed on your neck. Or not. What? There's so many ideas about who to worship in the world and where to place one's attention, so many fads that come and go. And if you see all the people who were movie stars and famous, and then they show on the internet now everywhere, this is what they used to look like, this is what they look like now. It's shocking, actually. But Krishna always looks beautiful. And he always wears he's always the sportiest one. His outfits, he wears such clothes that every time people see him, which is one of the characteristics of Vrindavan, it's this wonderment that how does Krishna look so good? He looked good yesterday, but he looks better today. And they keep saying that every day. When they see him, he's a knockout every time. People can't stop looking at him because he's so beautiful. And so people come and go. In this world of Krishna, and we get enamored of it. Krishna says in the Gita, anything you see here that looks yeah, he's like, wow, that was kind of cool. Enamored of the material world. It's just a reflection. Point your attention to Krishna, and where Golokana Nijadamni Taleta Tasya Devi Mahesha Harinama Suteshu Teshu Tete Prabhava Nichaya Vihitaschayina Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I heard whoever was singing Govinda Jai Jai, well, I was in the house, I could hear it. Sing Jai Jai. And if you put your attention there in Vrindavan, all the things people you can worship here and get attached to. You get attached to them, you're going to be sorry. I remember when my parents were wrapping it up. They had pretty good time together. I think they were married for 6. Dad died, and there was some ceremony. I think one of the sayings was, we had a good run. And I was thinking, it's not a very long run, 70 years. And look how it ended. I always knew that would happen. I predicted it when I was a child. And so, whatever kind of run you think you're going to get in this material world, you better weight it with some clear-headed thing. It all comes to an end somehow or other. Hate the way it is. So don't get enamored, be creative, but don't get attached. It's not worth the detour for stupid stuff, and it's stupid. Just read Bhagavad Gita and you won't be stupid. That's a good bumper sticker. And then higher, trying to find some other place to live. There is no other place. But if you go to Nijadam, although a little village, it's all accommodating. And everyone loves one another. And even the animal wants us to come back to Vrindavan Dham. So we can start our journey there now. We are starting our journey. We can just give our heart and soul to it. No harm. All the sages said, all the great Acharya said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teach it. He said, just invest in Vrindavan, Krishna in Vrindavan, Raj Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, and worship Lord Chaitanya, who's worshiping Krishna in Vrindavan, and go to Vrindavan. And that's the perfection of life. So this feeling festival we've had here today, from the time we walked in, we felt fest here, going on and going around. It's just so touching. Hear from Krishna book, from the Bhagavatam, and chant Hare Krishna, and just get over this little hump of the material world. And then it's Sanatan Goswami leaving that last inn where he gave away all his gold. He got rid of his servant, and he just took off on his own. And then he was happy. And happy until we dropped the last little chip we have in the game that we're hiding under the mattress in the back room, and say, like, yes, but I got this little chip. I'm still going to play it sometime this lifetime. Whatever it is, forget it. Just invest in Vrindavan. and think of Vrindavan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat under the Imli tall tree from the morning time till this, when it started to turn to afternoon. He would sit there and he would just chant Hare Krishna. And if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did it, it's a good idea. So you can do it in Davis, you could do it in Santa Cruz, you can do it in San Jose. If you can do it in all those places, you can definitely do it in Burlingame. So no matter where we are, let's take Vrindavan with us. And also, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked us, distribute Vrindavan to everybody. Let everyone else have a chance to go back home, back to God. And it's the most wonderful sight to see. By Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, you can pick up from anywhere. Dog, Shivananda Singh pick up a little dog, said, you can come. Just bring everybody in. It's not Premanande Haribo, Sri Vrindavanam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo. So now we're going to go to Jagannath Puri. Who can stop us? We can do whatever we want. Right? What?